Morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this webinar session. I'm Tony Schönenberger, I'm the Executive Chairman of STARS. STARS is a global platform for dialogue to discuss developments which will impact our society as a whole, but also our businesses in the next couple of years. Today, we are starting a new webinar series on orientation in times of no direction. The first speaker is Peter MAURER. Peter, thank you very much for joining us. It's great and it's a great privilege to have you on this webinar. Peter MAURER has had a distinguished career in the Swiss diplomatic service. He was ambassador at the United Nations in New York. He was Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, so basically number 2 or Deputy Foreign Secretary of Switzerland. From 2012 to 2022, he was President of the ICRC, of the International Committee of the Red Cross, based in Geneva. Today, Peter is President of the Board of the Basel Institute on Governance. He's also a member of the Advisory Council of the International Institute of Strategic Studies, IISS, and he's also a member of the Board of Directors of Zurich Insurance. So Peter, thank you very much again for joining us. We are very much looking forward to your insights.
Thanks a lot for having me, Tony.
Thank you. We have now 30 minutes to discuss with Peter MAURER. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature below to type in your questions. And I'd like to encourage all of you to do it as quickly as possible because we are running out of time very fast. So let's start with a couple of questions. Peter, no doubt, our time is characterized by a complex system of a multitude of interactions, such as, and I just want to mention a couple of them, geopolitical and geoeconomic tensions and wars, systemic rivalries. Then I think of the emergence of a multipolar world, of climate change, energy crisis, migration, poverty, technological developments. So actually it's disruptions all over. Please, Peter, can you give us some orientation and direction in this crazy world?
Well, Tony and colleagues, thanks a lot for participating in the seminar. When I hear the question, I'm almost a little bit afraid that you are expecting from me to be the Marie Kondo of the international system and give directions on how to tidy up and become happy about the system. So it's not so easy with the international system as it is with private household mess. So I wanted maybe to give a couple of points which we should not forget when we look at the complex realities with which we are confronted. One, you have mentioned yourself, and you have basically already given a direction of 2 main categories which we tend to mesh up and which are different things. Either we talk about the international system, then we talk about actors, institutions, laws, processes, decision-making, or we talk about global issues. Global issues are challenges which we need to address, and there are multiple interactions between the international system and global issues, the energy crisis, the climate crisis, the technological transformations. These are issues which we need to accept that they have different paces, different mechanisms attached. So it's important. That would be my first point. My second point is that we tend to mesh up regularly when analyzing the international systems, challenges and issues and their respective ecosystem. Do we talk about the specificity of technological, environmental challenges, or do we talk about how these challenges fit into a broader landscape, and do we talk about the multiple interactions of a specific sectorial issues, or do we talk about the broader context in which we analyze? I think a third perspective is, I'm a historian from training, and I always like to use Fernand Braudel's category of short, medium, and long duration. It's very helpful to look at the complexities today and try to identify what are short-term events, what are medium-term developments, and what are long-term trends. It's very helpful to categorize, to structure, to give orientation, to know what we are talking about. My fourth point would be that it is useful to make contextual and societal distinction. Do we talk about the specific context, or do we talk about the perspective of a specific community, about academics, economics, about politicians? Do we talk about Asia or Europe or Latin America? So it's important. My fifth point would be that we always forget, and that's a little bit the consequence of technological development itself. What Tom Friedman mentioned, that the world is flat, now facts are flat. And we treat facts almost on an equal basis without talking about the dimensions of issues and the size of issues. And I think it's of critically important, if we want to be factful, that we do measure what the size of an issue is, and we learn to somehow see relationship of sizes between the problem. Is a problem the biggest problem, or is it just the biggest problem at a certain moment for a specific constituency? And do we need to take different perspectives? The sixth issue, which was always very dear to me as a president of ICRC, is also to talk and to distinguish the world of norms, laws, policies, and principles from the world of facts. Norms are important. They have a life of themselves, but they are not the life and the development of society. And so making this distinction, as Koselleck once has said, between the world of words and the world of things is of critical importance when we want to have a granular and more granular approach. Seventh, let me just finish up, is really always to distinguish issues in a professional perspective and issues from a political perspective. There are tensions. It's not the same. I don't want to say that politicians are unprofessional or that professionals don't understand of politics, but it's very useful when we are confronted in analyzing the world that we try to make a distinction. What does tell us professional logic about the energy crisis, the food crisis, the international systems, and what is a political appreciation and what are political dynamics? And then the last one, which is dear to what I'm doing now at the present moment, is really to make a distinction between governance issues and substantive challenges. Do we talk about the environment or climate change, or do we talk about the governance of climate change? Do we talk about a security issue in the Middle East, or do we talk about the governance of these issues through the international machinery and the international system? So sorry to be a little bit long on that, but I thought it's maybe good just to remind ourselves that what we perceive very often, very frankly, as a mess can be structured in very different ways. And depending on how we bring these elements together, it helps us tidying up the room a little bit, if not probably to be happy, as Mary Kondo wanted us to be happy when cleaning up our rooms.
Thank you very much for this analysis, Peter. But nevertheless, you know, for an amateur, everything is pretty complex and everything seems to be interconnected, obviously. Who is then in charge of really trying to solve issues? Is the role of the United Nations really a bit different in the future? Or, as you know, the UN very well, what will be the role of the UN, for instance? Or maybe I could add a second question right now. What could be the role of new players like the Global South or the G20 or the BRICS? And many other new fora?
I think the true answer, Tony, is that what makes the complexity is that there is no consensus and no common understanding at the present moment on who decides on what, where, and how. And the insecurity, volatility, fragmentation, and all the characteristics that complexity that we throw at our analysis of the international system is also due to the evaporation of a political consensus amongst power on how to take decision. And I think that makes the complexity. When you are an emerging power, you do not easily accept the existing structures as a given. You don't want only to have your say in what the future of the climate policy is internationally, what the future of economic policy is. You also want to decide on how the decisions about these issues are taken. And the present institutions are not matching the dramatic power shifts that we have experienced and continue to experience. And one of the difficulties is, of course, in analyzing, for instance, the power of new emerging structures and countries, is that the facts, there is a factual base and there is a potential base. We all know that the Global South is 85% of the population, 40% of GDP, but potentially this situation looks different. And when you are an actor in the Global South, you will try to look at potential and not at actual powers. And because you look and you take decision in the view of the potential, you don't accept the way decisions are taken at the present moment. So I think we are in front of a period in which we will have to find a new deal on global governance issues. I don't say that there is no consensus anywhere. We have seen decisions taken, but I think what we perceive as difficult, as complex as is exactly that there is insufficient consensus, and the old institutions are not in a good position to just step into this new environment.
You're speaking of a new deal. Clearly, we are moving into a kind of a multipolar world. Could you perhaps look into 2030 or even 2050? How will the world be structured then?
It's very difficult to make forecasts. But again, as a reading aid, my sense has always been that the powers with more impact and relevance will be those powers who will contribute to solve some of the big issues of humanity. And therefore, the question is a little bit, where are those powers and how to constitute political will, which will lead to positive contribution to solving problems, the enormous security issues, the environmental issues, the economic issues. The future will be shaped by those who find solutions to the problems. And I simply don't believe, while we are sometimes a little bit depressed in looking at the sort of little of a too little constructive engagements of actors in today's world, or even the opting out of international relations. But that can't be where 2030 and 2050 will be. Sooner or later, we will hopefully see a turn of the pendulum, and then the structures of the future will be defined by those who invest into the solutions of problems.
I would like to turn now to the geoeconomics. A couple of questions. The impact of what we have just discussed, of these global geopolitical developments. What is the impact on the global economy?
Well, I think we often make a mistake on looking at linear impacts. When you are in complex situation, the impacts are not linear, and you see contradictory trends emerging. And I think what we have seen over the last couple of years is that the increasing power competition, the insecurity in the international system, is somehow changing the pattern of cooperation and conflict between countries, between globalization and deglobalization. And so in that sense, I think this global economic system is also breaking up, and economic operators and political operators try somehow new ways to de-risk their activities from the fact that they live in a risky environment. So what is the natural perspective if you consider the United States a risky environment because of its internal divisions, if you consider China risky because of the US-China competition? So what do? You continue to invest in those markets as good as you can, and you consider reasonable, and you try to de-risk by diversifying your investments. And I think while we have had periods of relatively uncontested globalization, we now have these dilemmas breaking up and putting economic and political operators in front of difficult trade-offs. You have to do new risk assessments, and you have to assess how you hedge, how you de-risk whatever economic activities you are undertaking. And this needs, I think, a more granular analysis of the political economies. I think for a very long time you could just look at the figures and then take economic decisions. I think today looking at the figures doesn't bring you very far if you discount what the economic and political the political economics look like.
In this context, and you know many boards of directors, etc., are business leaders good enough today, because it's a new context, to cope with these crises and particularly with this uncertainty?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say they are really up to the task, but who is? I think it is obvious that, and we have seen that over the last couple of years, that responsible business leadership has become more interested in looking at the geopolitical situation and trying to rationalize what it means for their respective business and how they somehow navigate a political environment which is increasingly complex. So there is a consciousness, and there is maybe more investments which need to be made in getting shrewder in navigating and also in defining strategies, business, corporate, and investment strategies to navigate this difficult environment. Let me just say, a lot will not only depend from the business community as such and from their operation. The question is also how political decisions are taken and what the space is and the adaptability of market economies. How can you integrate impact into return on investment calculation? This seems to me one of the really big political economic issues that we are dealing with. How can you make profit while saving the environment and ensuring energy security? These are, at the end of the day, questions on how flexible the market economic system is and whether we stay on running business on a return on investment base, or whether societal, environmental, and other impact-related issues are integrated and can be integrated into basic political decision-making and business decision-making. And so this needs, of course, more sophistication than the ROE decisions that business has traditionally taken.
There is a question from the audience. Emanuele Ferrari, a STARS alumna, is asking, in your view, what is the role of corporations, large MNCs, smaller companies in solving the issues?
Well, I have always thought that when everybody plays his role, that at the end of the day, the responsibility and the role of companies is to contribute through their economic activities to have positive impact, economic, social, and environmental impact. At the end of the day, it's a little bit whether we can operationalize sustainability for economic operators, whether they are big and small. But companies can substitute themselves to dysfunctioning political systems. They will soon hurt a glass ceiling, or they will step into roles and responsibilities which are not theirs and which they cannot fulfill. So today I have the impression we are rather overburdening our expectations to economic operators, while at the end of the day, realistically speaking, economic operators can take into account societal, environmental, social, political factors, but they have to contribute through economic activities and wealth creation to solve the problems. They have to frame their economic activities in a way that they are not harmful, and even better, that they have positive impact.
Thank you, Peter. We have only 4 or 5 minutes left, and I would like to focus now the remaining minutes on your work as the president of the ICRC on the humanitarian work. I mean, you were president of the ICRC. You visited, you told me many times before that you visited many conflicts all over the world. You met many presidents, prime ministers, warlords, war criminals, obviously. Is this increasing number of conflicts we seem to see, I'm not sure whether this is correct, is it a reality to be accepted in the future?
Well, I fear that it will be in insecure, complicated, and complex transition periods. They are normally accompanied by more conflictual relationships. And unfortunately, I can see the trend breaking. We have seen conflicts having more negative humanitarian impacts in societies and broader impacts on regions, and I haven't seen a trend break over the last 20 years. Conflicts have become longer, more harmful. They had more systemic impacts. They had more regional impacts. They have been more disruptive. And in the environment which I have described, in which the cursor from cooperation to conflictual relationships between the big powers is not moving in the right direction, I fear that this is a transitional period with more conflict, more needs that we will see emerging. I would still hope that we will see other times as well. But I think in terms of the global system, we need to hope that there is also a little bit of sense of common responsibility, of nudging countries together when things get too much out of control. And the fact that we have obviously important actors in the international system in complete disregard of some of the basic international norms, laws, is an issue of concern.
In this context, another question from Anita Varney. How do we best prepare young people for these changes and these problems to be those who shape the future by solving problems?
Well, from my experience in different places I have been working, I have coined the word of frontline experience, and I consider and continue to believe that the best young professionals can do is looking at the front line of issues, whether they deal in economics, academics. There are front lines everywhere. Be close to where the problem in your respective sector is. Try to understand the dynamics bottom up, and not to take a too lofty conceptual top-down perspective. You need to learn about some of these dynamics, and you learn it when you are in communities, when you dig in, when you really try to operationalize wherever you are the concept of frontline engagement. Talk to the people who are where the problems are, and try to be part of solutions. And I think that's an interesting perspective, which I find very often in Generation C anyway. Yeah, they want to be relevant and have relevance and impact, and it goes with developing for yourself, wherever you are, the concept of frontline, bottom-up solutions of problems.
Now we are running out of time, Peter. Last question, final question, more a personal question. How optimistic are you looking at the state of the world?
Well, I oscillate in my optimism and pessimism 10 times a day. Yeah, it depends also in which contexts you are. And normally when I am at a university with young people, I'm very optimistic, because I think there are a terrible amount of intelligent people with interesting perspectives, and I think we have all the brains and means to solve all the problems. When I listen to the frontline news, I get a little bit more pessimistic, and very frankly today, I don't even read it anymore in order to keep my psychological health. I have simply no appetite to listen to statements neither of Mr. Sambar nor Mr. Netanyahu on certain issues, just because I don't think that these statements make one optimistic that they are leading to the future. I think we need other approaches, and in that sense, I just stay with the positive messages.
Okay, Peter, time is up, unfortunately. The title of this webinar series is Orientation in Times of No Direction. So indeed, I believe orientation is really needed in this, in inverted comma, crazy world. So Peter, thank you very much for your insights, for your analysis. You helped us to better understand all these disrupting phenomena in complex, interconnected systems. We wish you all the best, and we would really look forward to having you again at some STARS events. The next speaker on this webinar series will be Professor Huang Jing on 19th of April. Jing is Chinese-born, he's American passport holder, he's teaching in Shanghai, and he's one of the top experts on geopolitics. I hope to see you there. Goodbye, take care, and have a lovely weekend. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.